Right, right. And that's what I said. I just want to make sure that, because I know obviously we want everybody wants the students protected. Everybody wants the teachers protected, but they're not the only ones in the building. Working in the building at night, they have to be protected as well. So we can't,
Right,
I know in the past, we shut down the air conditioners while they were working. I think it's imperative that they stay up for them.
How do I keep that feedback from going, Anthony? Yeah, I did you on, but how do I keep the feedback from coming?
Right.
So again, anybody who finds
But they'll
out,
be able
let
to,
us know and
but
we'll
can they
redirect
still
us
hear?
if necessary.
Yeah, because I just
Okay.
want to make sure they're not susceptible to the virus either, since they're doing important work for all of us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Any other questions? Okay. A couple other things that I did want to just touch base on before we possibly get back to the document itself is I did want to bring you just up to date on
Yeah,
where we
'cause
are with our teachers.
I'm gonna turn the camera around.
Regarding category 1.
I'm ready.
Category 2 teachers.
You are the man, Anthony. I love
All day
you.
long with our teachers who are in the categories 1 and 2 and trying to find, just look at all different possibilities. So I wanted to just give you a couple of numbers. We have about 180 category 1 teachers that we have been working with over the last several weeks and moving forward. About 110 of them are remaining virtual. That's about 60% of those teachers are remaining virtual. They have the need of the school did, the student schedules dictate or require or allow for those virtual positions to continue. We have about 55, so about 30% of our category 1 teachers who are returning to brick and mortar. And
Perfect.
the
Yep.
majority
Thanks,
of
Anthony.
those
Appreciate it.
are, well, pretty much
Right.
all of those
Thanks, Tim.
have had those conversations, have the additional PPEs that we talked about, and we have mentioned in the MOUs, the draft, the taller plexiglass, the surgical masks, and so forth. And they are comfortable in returning with those accommodations. We have about 15 to 18 of our category 1s that we are still working with and who have a monitor still in the classroom while they remain remote. And that many of them are doing that until they can get a vaccination. And some of those are on the slate, and I'm going to talk about that in just a moment, about our 65 and plus vaccinations that are going on this week. We have about 15 or so who are taking a leave of absence. And I will preface that by saying not all of them are COVID. We have some that are going out on maternity leave. We have some that are having foot surgery. We have some that are doing FMLA. There are other reasons, but I didn't distinguish all of them. We have about 3 or 4 that we are still working with that has not been determined yet because we're still in this conversation. And I just came out of a conversation right before this meeting too, as we are having these, as I said, as we go on. We have about 25 of our category 2 people that we have been working with. Remember, the category 2 are our 65 and over population. 75% of those teachers, 19 of them are remaining virtual. We have 4 are returning to brick and mortar. We have 1 that we are still working with a monitor, and I do believe that one is until the vaccine comes until they're able to have their 2 vaccines. And we have a couple that are doing a leave of absence and or are looking at retirement, and I think that might have been already planned. So again, so I wanted to give you just those numbers because the work that has gone on, not only from the teacher standpoint, the administrators, HR, I'm going to give a shout out to my partners who have been on the phone with teachers, administrators, and so forth, having those conversations, looking at each and every possibility. I know our executive directors have also been involved because it does affect, part of it affects the master scheduling and so forth. And so really we are continuing those, and I am sure we will continue those discussions through this week. So I really wanted everyone to know that we are talking individually and one-on-one. I sat in on a couple of them over the last couple of weeks as well. But and it's not even, we have the conversation and the next day they have questions, we're back on the phone with them and we're talking to them. You know, we want everybody to feel comfortable. We want everybody to have the PPE they were putting them out that day. There was no 4 or 5 day wait. It had perfect.
Every single one. Your request this morning was sent out, so.
Excellent. So I wanted to let you know also, over the weekend, 5 o'clock on Friday, we got word that the Department of Health had set aside vaccines for our employees age 65 and over. And that is including all employees, instructional, support, administrative, contracted services, our substitutes. Because we have 300 substitutes that are 65 and over and who are waiting for this so that they can possibly go back and help us out in the classroom, which is a great thing. So we spent this weekend, Saturday, setting up a scheduling. Because you can imagine, I went to bed Friday night. I'll just share the story. I went to bed Friday night thinking, how many people do I need for Saturday calling 1,330 people? Because that's how many we do have in our district. And we were very, very fortunate to have, we've got in touch with someone who came in and set up I think it's gone very, very smoothly, a scheduling system where people can go on, easily type in their information and schedule an appointment that started today, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday this week, and Monday. So we have 5 days at all 3 Department of Health locations. Every 15 minutes, they can take 5 employees, so they have their time, they have their location, and they are able to get those this week. And I believe this afternoon I checked with Ms. Karen, and I think, Colleen got hers, yay. I think that we had about 450 already had an appointment for this week out of 1330, which I think is fabulous. And so we are very appreciative of the Department of Health. Now, a couple of follow-up questions that I was kind of pushing for. I was on the phone. I was saying, what about our category 1? Can we get, and we went back and we tried, and they are following the executive order right now that says 65 and over. So we were not able to do that, but they do know our wishes. My wish is that all of us could get it, but we know who we've been trying to assist and trying to work for, and so I wanted to let you know that we had, we're continuing to have this conversation, but I do think this is I think we all have to be very appreciative of this this week for our one subgroup of 65 and over employees. So I wanted to share that. Did anybody have any questions about that? And I know I'm going to pass it to Dr. Corbett. He's got some information on the students. Okay. Right, Dr. Corbett.
So the good news is for students, we're not seeing the mass exodus from PCS Online. We have about, since December 10th, we've seen 2,450 students leave from PCS Online to go back to face-to-face. We had on December 10th, 70.37% of our students were face-to-face. And as of when this poll was made, which I think was yesterday morning, it was 72.93. The interesting mix in there, as we have our discussions to keep this kind of in the back of your mind, is we have more kids face-to-face in elementary. Almost 20% of the elementary kids in PCS Online, which means conversely, a little over 80% are face-to-face. But in the secondary, it's more like 2/3 face-to-face, 1/3 online still. That's all.
Okay. So I will, again, we went through the information we talked about last week. We provided a response. I think I see you have it in front of you. So I'm going to just kick it back to you, Nancy or Joanne, if you want to go through and talk about any of the areas that you want to. Those of you that are online, I can't see the chat, what's being typed in there because I'm at a distance. So again, if you have a question, just know that I'm not able to read the chat. So I'm not ignoring you or anything. I just can't see that from here. I wanted to
see anything.
Exactly, see the room.
If they want to speak up, what is the system that
So
you like?
I have Lisa, Freeman is on there, and so she's keeping an eye on if anybody has a question online or has a comment or an input, they can just raise their hand, and she will then interrupt and say, we have somebody on. that has their hand.
Okay, great. you want to go through this paragraph by paragraph?
Page 1.
Anybody have a preference? Yeah.
We can go through or we can tackle the issue that
There are a few issues that are of major importance.
That's largely the problem, I think. We sent over a spreadsheet to kind of show, that's the last time we were trying to say, well, maybe instead of having just a cap per grade, let's have a cap per size of class. So we just did a quick spreadsheet, and on the spreadsheet, I don't know if you guys have it in front of you, but we had different size classrooms, and we just picked from 600 to 1,000, went to increments of 50. We took out roughly 160 square feet for the teacher area, and I just figured that as 20 feet by 8 feet. So we have an 8-foot teaching wall, figure 20 feet wide. And then we thought, okay, what if we gave 20 square feet per kid, 22 and a half? So it's a simple spreadsheet.
Oh, that's the
But
top number.
if you look at the column, and I'm gonna just pick the start with the one that says 20 square feet per student. 20 square feet will be 4 feet by 5 feet. We talk about social distancing, we're not anywhere near 6 feet, but it's 4 feet by 5 feet. So we said, okay, if we use that one, you can see that in a small classroom of 600 square feet, we could fit 22 kids. And in a big classroom like a vocational lab, we could fit 42 kids. And everything in between. That, even that one would be problematic for us to commit to. But, pick one in the middle, like 25 square feet, which would be 5 feet by 5 feet. It could range from 18 kids to 34 kids. It's real easy to do a spreadsheet. It's real easy to talk about, so what would it look like if you make the numbers match. The difficulty we had, and we gave you some bullet points just to talk to our principals, the difficulty was trying to put it into action. You take a lot of our schools that were built more than 10 years ago, the standard size classrooms around 900, 950 square feet. But the new ones, because of the smart law that they passed, the next oxymoron I know, they passed the smart law, right? But it's down close to 900 or 825 to 850 square feet is a standard classroom now. But then like Colleen at St. Pete High, in the building, the big classrooms are 781, but most of them are like 600. So it starts to get problematic. So then we start thinking about from a master schedule. You probably talk about this better than I can. Almost from the get-go, if we were to do this, we would have to, right off the bat, start moving teachers around because a teacher, it would require us to take teachers who have lower class sizes to begin with, like teachers teaching intensive reading classes. We'd have to put them in the smallest classrooms, and it would probably necessitate class changes during the day for the teacher. Because most teachers, it just doesn't distribute. You got 24 kids per class, it's an average. It's not 24 kids per class. You'll have a class with 13, you'll have a class with 28. And so we would have to take the period you had 13, we'd put you in our smallest classroom. The period you had 28, the largest classroom. So the more we looked at it, we just thought it got more and more problematic. So the good news as we're looking at it, when the numbers came in with only 2,400 kids moving, that gave us solace that at least all the kids aren't coming back and we're dealing with these giant numbers. But in talking to the principals, again, I don't want to repeat the stuff we wrote on the board, but in talking to the principals, we still think that the best approach is you try to get classroom by classroom, school by school, and let people work it out. But for us to be able to put it in writing, we were going to implement a system like this. We just don't think it's anything doable. So, I don't know, Rita or Barry want to talk about it.
I think you said it perfectly, and even like in school at Tinsley High School, there wouldn't be enough large classrooms to float all the classes that would have, more kids in them. They don't even have enough of those large classrooms. So.
I just think that having teachers trying to make decisions about what classrooms we're going to be moving them to in between periods creates more movement and puts teachers in an even more difficult situation. Room to room.
Well, I don't know if it would necessitate that for during the day. I'm not sure that I understand why you would think that, but I mean, I do get what you're saying. But right now, without these additional kids in, we have classrooms where they're less than 2 feet apart already. So that doesn't seem like social distancing was worked on from classroom to classroom, teacher to teacher. It wasn't done very well up until now. And now we're bringing in more kids, obviously, luckily, not all of them. But still another almost 2,500 kids is going to make some impact in some of the classes. I think we are still better off sticking to trying to find a number where we will not put children closer than. We need a distance that we will stay as our minimum. Because as much I'm interested, obviously my job is to protect my teachers, but all of our jobs are to protect our kids. And as much as our governor believes that the children are not susceptible, they are. And with the new variant, even more so. Certainly more so, they spread it more and they are susceptible to more suffering from the virus, a more intense case, I guess. I'm not willing to say that we're just going to work from class to class when I see how that went with the last influx of students, which granted was a large group. The second quarter, we saw almost 14,000 additional students come into the buildings. So that was a large group. And we're not dealing with that large of a group now, but as I said, there are classrooms where they are closer than 2 feet apart. The public is still under the impression that our classrooms are providing 6 feet distancing. They are still under that impression because of what was on the website, because of what was originally talked about ages ago. And they didn't realize that the 6 feet went away almost immediately in August when the CDC changed it from 6 feet and a mask to 6 feet or a mask. So because we had the mask mandate, we were able to seat our students closer to each other. We didn't have to do the 6 feet. So that's never been the case. Some classrooms were lucky enough to have 6 feet distancing, but most of them did not. I'm just concerned that if we don't have a minimum number, some of these children will be much too close together. And it's simply not safe for them. And then there's too many people in the room. That's my concern.
Just for clarification, Nancy, two questions I have so I can maybe look at something. Oh, you can't hear me, I'm so sorry. Just for clarification, so that I can look at something in a second and just to kind of get the idea of what you're referencing as they're closer than 2 feet apart. Is that center of body to center, like, my mouth, right, and nose to that person's mouth and nose, or is it shoulder to shoulder? What are you referencing?
It was head to head.
So literally like my head, okay. And
I
can
believe
you
that's
not-
what, yeah.
Now, if you think about what you're saying, so everyone in the ceiling top is 2 feet by 2
Yeah,
feet.
I don't see that.
So you're talking about, if you take from where that angle of the wall is right behind you, you just go straight over.
So maybe it was shoulder to shoulder. It wasn't in my classroom.
It's
I- I-
Shoulder to
I think
shoulder,
it's
yeah.
on top. I think
Right.
the top goes center to center.
Right.
Everybody else uses.
Right.
And it gives us a frame of reference. It's real different, like when I was saying 20 square feet is 4 feet by 5 feet, I was talking center and head to center and head.
Right, that's how
Everybody
I've
gets
always-
25 square
right,
feet. I
which
just think
to
it's a
me
better
is-
way for us to talk.
Yeah, to me, like,
Okay,
we do
in
like-
my lab, I have a student who has something on the thumbs measure, and he went from middle of head to middle of head. I have a small lab admittedly, and I also make sure that if I have 23 students in the room, which one of the periods I do, the computers that are close by me are empty, those kids are right next to each other. But I feel safer that way. It is 2 feet 9 inches from head to head at high school. He measured with his phone, and I did the whole
So it's gonna be a big issue.
And that's what I was gonna ask, was not to single or call a room or a school out, that's not about that, it's just about so that I can look in the system and say, here's what I'm seeing, and then I can get the exact square footage and it's the number of kids that should be, if they're all, in attendance that day. Can you give me a couple, Colleen, I'll look at, which period is that for you?
7th.
Okay, and can you give me another, is there another high school, or is this a,
This was in elementary school.
okay,
I can tell you in mine right now with 45 desks, at most you've got 46 inches from head to head, and I now have to add at least 4 desks additional to that in the schedule starting tomorrow. That's at 46 inches.
Okay, so let me
Because
take,
we also have to have, this was from the fire code. 30 inches wide for them to get in.
okay,
So that full square footage isn't all usable square footage.
That's part of the problem.
Those are built-in housing we have at schools,
Hmm.
you know. there's a lot of space in the built-in housing.
Do we have any data on, this might be another we talked about. Do we have any data on the number of positive cases from our line list? What I mean by that is, when we have a positive case, immediately they go back to the last 2 days that the student has been on campus. And from that, we pull the list of students and their seating charts. And then we send that seating chart to the Department of Health. They come back with a list of students that were in close proximity. Traditionally, it's the group of students that have been around them, and we quarantine those students. Now, I know we've had
We don't.
we've had a lot. We've had a lot of positive cases, but of those positive cases, we have not had a student from the quarantine list that have tested positive based on their contact next to the person that had tested positive. And so when I start thinking about the safeguards that have been in place, and we've had quite a few students that have been on our campus. We've quarantined cheerleading squads, the whole basketball team, football players, band.
That's the place that we've seen. So what we've not seen is spread in classrooms.
Right.
We have seen spread in sports teams because they practice without masks.
Right.
And most of the classrooms are set up 4 feet apart, anywhere from 3 to 4 feet apart. So it has helped, but now we're saying that's going to be an issue, and we would like it to remain at least 3 to 4 feet apart, so that we are still having that. If this becomes a standard for the 2.5 feet apart, then you have to quarantine more, whether you think they have it or not, because now CDC rules step in. So now you're going to add to your quarantine numbers, and more students are going to be out of school trying to get into campus, which we know doesn't work.
We don't have data to
So,
support that. There's no data to support
you know.
that. The data has basically been saying that the quarantine distance, there haven't been cases where the people from the line list have been contracting.
No,
COVID.
I'm saying the original person with the case, right now, you're only going around them because technically, for the most part, we're trying to do the 4 feet. So you only have to, but if they're all now closer, now you gotta go another ring around from that original case. So now you have
They're
twice
closer.
as many students quarantining if we're not keeping some kind of a space.
So
And I'm
for a
not sure
larger-
how we're keeping track of the quarantines. I mean, how would we know for sure that none of those kids, because out of the 70 cases that we reported yesterday, there was 1 quarantine, and a half, a partial.
The reason for that is because so many parents, when they came back from winter break, they kept their kids home because they knew they had contact with positive. So there weren't a lot of kids who were in school last
Yeah.
week. And so those, they caught up and they were doing quarantines this week, many of them weren't in school. What's interesting is that the board workshop they got from the senior advisory group was talking about just this issue, how much, the question was asked, how much spread's happening in school. They're not seeing it, but additionally, she talked about 2 studies that she's going to send us the links to the article. There was one in Mississippi and one in North Carolina that were that referee journals type studies were really set up well, and they're finding the same thing, that the kids who come to school when there's masks in place are much less likely, there's less of a chance of them catching it than average, right? And that kids who stay home from school have more of a chance of catching it.
So what's a practical quantifiable number we can put in the classrooms?
I don't know if we can get there, but I keep hearing this 3 or 4 feet. I don't believe we're talking center to center. I mean, you said 48 inches center to center.
46.
You said 2.9.
46.
I'm saying you went from middle of head to middle
Yeah.
of head, just like you said.
I can tell you from mine, the desks are 26.5 inches wide. There's 19.5 inches between desks. That's 46 inches total from center of desk to center of desk. Head to head. That's less than 40. Before I add the 4
But
desks to
not
give me the 20.
2 inches.
You gotta get to 29.
As
How
of
big is
right
your
now,
classroom?
yeah, that could.
How big is your classroom total?
What's that?
I said
How
they're
big is
not
your
much.
classroom
Square
total?
foot.
2 inches short.
Is this room smaller, this room?
Small. It's the new building on Hallmark.
So it's probably 8.
Within the last 5 years or whatever. it was built.
Probably 830, something like that.
Yeah.
But that also includes a built-in cabinet, which cuts down your square footage.
So is there something like we can get to like 4 feet center to center? Is that even attainable in high school?
My fear of doing anything is we'll have an exception somewhere.
Well, that's what conversations can do, like,
Yeah.
At least it's something to start with and to go on.
Yeah.
Some people really have trouble with visual and perception, and if you can give them something quantifiable and measurable.
Yeah.
You know, we
Unless-
have to
yeah.
teach our students that, SMART goals must be measurable,
Right.
so.
if we don't have a quantifiable number, we won't have a number. Like it'll just go by the wayside.
Yes.
At that
What
point, you might as well declare students have no social distancing.
What we had,
Good luck.
what we've learned, and as we are educators, you learn from your experience. What we learned from the first half of the year and the first MOU, there weren't a lot of specifics. And because there weren't a lot of specifics, there were a lot of problems in a lot of different schools and a lot of different administrators who interpreted things differently than others. Some schools were actually having their 6 feet, 4 to 6 feet, because they were taking the words at their true meaning, the greatest extent possible. And then there were others who just said, well, it's not really possible, so let's just put them in. And then we got the 2 feet in some places where they were 2 feet apart or 3. And we would like to avoid that because we can't depend on interpretation. We would like specifics. I mean, I don't want to jump off this subject, but that's part of the problem all through the document is that the specifics are missing and thus open to interpretation. And that is not a smart agreement. It's not a good agreement.
If we were to put that, and I'm not saying we're going to put that, I just want to flesh this idea. If we were to put that in, would you be willing to raise the caps on bigger classrooms? So in other words, if we put in 16 square feet, which is 4 by 4, in a 600 square foot classroom with 160 out for the teacher, you could put 28 kids. On a 1,000 square foot classroom, you could put 53 kids. So are you saying we could put 53 kids in a bigger classroom?
Right? Yeah, I was going to say, where's that classroom?
Well, even like the 850 square foot classrooms, we have lots of them. 43 would be the number. And so, you know, we can do anything we want. We can't do everything we want.
Yeah.
So if we're saying in smaller classrooms, we got to reduce the numbers of kids, and in larger classrooms, we have to increase the number of kids, right? And it's just, the kids got to be somewhere.
Yes.
And I think like part of then that goes back to what you said earlier, that also then I think we need to add something in there that explains that as we're trying to meet this number, if we're able to quantify it, right, that teachers have to understand, they have to agree to possibly, if you have a smaller class of period and there's another class that needs to remain intact and come to your class, you're going to need to flip classes. That would need to be in there as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Right, because I'm saying, like Ms. Morzani, I'm saying you have 29 in period 1, then it goes down to 21 physically face-to-face. So it'd be something like, I'm not saying 21 is a low number, right? It's still a good solid number, but could be something like somebody's second period who would need a, you know what I'm saying? If your classroom is bigger, then teachers have to agree. I understand I'm gonna have to flip my classroom and go to this space for this number of kids and to this space for this number of kids.
That we may have.
May have, not I will, right?
I believe on my campus, mine was smaller.
Smaller rooms,
You-
yeah,
you-
that's just an example, but
Sorry,
yeah.
I can't hear you.
It's one of the newer classrooms on campus. I believe it's smaller than the classroom.
Correct.
Yeah, just an example. But if it's a larger room, somebody's sitting in with 19 kids, for example, then it may be, you've got to move to a smaller space.
In this,
I'll tell you one, we can go down this path and talk about, but I'll tell you one of the square footages of classrooms are in fish reports, they're not in focus. So if we start doing this, it's like, from a master scheduling standpoint, it's like blowing up master scheduling. We're not sure how long it will even take to accomplish it. It's just,
Yeah, it seems as though that this square footage would be cumbersome. So what we're thinking, like, again, I don't feel as though, I don't want to, like, I'm speaking for, but we need something to be like, hey, management, we have heads that are, or even something we can take to you. We have heads in this classroom and this period at this school that are 34 inches apart. At that point, without a measure, some sort of measuring stick, it makes it hard to be like, hey, here's an issue that, issues that can be measured are easier to deal with than issues that can't be measured. Just like, classroom behavior, like any rule you have must be a quantifiable thing. Qualitative stuff doesn't work as well. So I think that's something what we're going for there. Like, and if one thing teachers absolutely are is ultimately flexible. Most of the time to their own detriment. So that's whatever compromise we need to come to. It needs to be something that can be measured, or it's not something we can take to you and be like, hey, we're having this issue, let's try to solve it.
And you're right. I mean, I do see what your point is. I did have in my discussion with at the rep council in talking about this idea that we're trying to go by distance rather than cap numbers. We did get one complaint from a teacher who said, but I have a very big room. Then I will be teaching more students than so-and-so down the hall. That's not fair. And so I can't say that there aren't teachers who would not like the idea that if they happen to have a large room, they will be getting more kids than the small room down the hall. So that would be an issue for that teacher. But I would also say that then we move them from that room and give it to somebody else who doesn't have an issue with that, or who possibly has is a Cat 1, who possibly has a comorbidity that really requires a larger room, so that those rooms are used. Those larger rooms should be used for people who we know we're trying to protect and put fewer kids close around them. The other issue, even though we did have a specific in the MOU, one very specific last MOU was the 8-foot buffer for teachers. That was specific, and it's still there, and we're still talking about that. And yet there are many schools that have a 6-foot buffer. They've made it 6 feet because they misunderstood that it's 6 feet from the teacher to the student, and that there has to be some space for the teacher to physically exist. So, the teacher's not embedded in the wall. So, and
Yeah.
right. They gave 6 feet from the wall. So it was, so what we want, it's 6 feet from, the desk, from
I just want to make sure we're all the same.
yes. So that was misunderstood, and that was misinterpreted by people, and it was a definitive number. There's also administrators who are telling teachers, good teachers don't stay in their buffer zones. That's happening too. We have lots of people who want to interpret things their own way. I get it. They run their school. They're trying to set up something. We need to be, that is why we have to err on the side of caution and give very specific things for the protection. Right now, safety is the priority. Everybody wants to give the highest quality education. Everyone in this room wants that. There are no educators here or anywhere that want to give a lousy education to their kids. They didn't choose teaching for that reason. But right now, safety is elevated a little bit above that. So if it means that, yes, we know a good teacher circulates among her students or his students, we know that the relationship is stronger when they do that. But should they feel guilty about staying in their buffer zone?
No.
Should they be made to feel guilty by their administration? Absolutely not. Then, so safety, that's why we're looking for a specific number to work with. We simply want to make sure that safety cannot be misinterpreted anywhere.
At the same time, I want to interject something. I understand master scheduling. And I understand the 7th period class is full because my colleague who teaches the same subject has a planning period 7.
Right.
And I have half IB kids in that class, at which time, because of their block triple schedule, that it would be a scheduling nightmare. And I made I don't want to leave my classroom. I figured out how to work around it for me to be safe. Okay? So somehow, some way, there needs to be some sort of fairness, but also to include teacher input. Like, I wouldn't want Darlene to come to me and say, oh, because of this, I have to move 4 of your students. I figured out a workaround for it. And I'm okay with it. Plus the fact, as of February 9th, I feel more comfortable because I'm safe. Okay. And I feel fortunate that Pinellas County Schools was able to do that. But just like what Nancy said, you know, a large, and Bill, you were talking, if you have a teacher that's got a large classroom, there's got to be some sort of compromise for safety reasons. They either have to take the fewer students in a smaller class or be given the option of staying in the bigger class with more students in order for all these numbers to work.
The conversations are still going to be necessary, obviously, and Colleen had expressed this to me earlier, saying that I would actually be made to move to a different room if they would follow these rules, and I don't want to. I'm happy with the way it is. So if you talk to the teacher and they say, no, I'm cool with this, I've worked it out, I'm comfortable, then you don't have that problem. The conversations don't disappear just because we set a number. The conversations still are part of this. Because there may be teachers, there are, I won't say plenty, I don't know, but there are a lot of teachers who don't mind having a lot of kids in their room. They're not as concerned as others. That will alleviate some of the issues with master scheduling when those discussions are had. And they say, no, you know what? You can put a few more in my room. I can stick one in that corner over there. I can put one over there. I'm cool with that. And the kids are still kind of far apart. The conversations are still going to have to happen.
And the number, the quantifiable number is where the conversation starts. When it gets to that point, you can go, wait a minute, now we're having a problem.
Well, kind of what I was thinking was, like, we could still use these caps, these numbers that you got that are in the MOU right now, the, you know, K3, 21 kids. But keep that, but if the CDC guidelines are not met for distance, then we have those conversations case by case. You know, if I have 21 kids in my classroom, and that's meeting the guideline, but my 21 kids are only 2.5 feet apart, I'm just making this up, I don't know. Then that would be a conversation that would need to be had. Whereas if my neighbor has those 21 kids in her classroom, but they're still that 4 feet apart, you're not violating CDC, then that's not necessarily a conversation that needs to be had. Which I think is just another way of looking at what they were saying.
So we explored the idea of what we're talking about. We looked at the formula and thought how unworkable this probably is. We then thought, what about the idea that conversations we held is an idea that we were exploring. The issue is you're asking us to commit in a contract. This is a contract, so if kids are not 4 feet apart, regardless of how we measure, and I'm sure people will have measuring, you know, tape measures and whatnot, but it's a breach of the contract. What we considered or threw around, but we didn't develop it, is to have some sort of process where a teacher or staff member finds that there is Nancy, you mentioned where kids are 2 feet apart. I don't know where this classroom is, but the teacher knows where it is. So what's the process for that to go up the flagpole where somebody addresses it?
Yeah.
Making sure that someone can address it.
I like that.
That's
No,
what we were
that-
kind of
No.
exploring.
But address it in what way? What are you going to,
Well,
what's the measurement?
Yeah, and so that's the thing, we,
Comment, address it in what way if it says they're gonna be 4 feet apart? Address it in what way?
Then you move them to where? There's gotta be a bigger room, you said there are, I mean, there's options. Well, let's use the example that you were using, the 21, right? And the one classroom is like, I'm looking at here and figure it out. And the other classroom is, well, I can't put 2 more, what would happen if I put 2 more feet?
It's like
2 more
30
feet
seconds.
in that, 2 people can get off.
There we go.
2
No,
more.
don't give the child 2 more feet. That's gonna make him
You know,
talk
what
about
would, because then there would be, then that would have satisfied that teacher, and now we have an issue with that. And we're just, that's what we have all been saying, I mean, we're right there with you, we've been trying to figure out what is the solution.
We've talked about putting in this language about so many feet or square feet per kid, but to say, call it a target, call it something, rather than a hard line and saying, call it a target, and if the school goes over the target, then there's some process where you bring it to us and we have a group that looks at it. It all gets problematic. It's all,
So I know that Dwayne and Rita like this idea, but one of the things that we were throwing around is that the directors would get involved with working with the principal on fixing the master scheduling problem.
And that's great to continue, but what I think is, I think what you're asking for is specify the remedy. If a teacher raises the issue, can we specify the remedy? And there's only 2 remedies I know of. One is the students move to a teacher who has fewer kids, and we change the student schedule around, which teachers don't like, parents don't like, kids don't like, right? Or the other room. Those are the 2 remedies, so that if we get precise.
Or hire someone else, but then we have.
Right.
But we
change kids around all the
We
time.
move kids around all the time. We move kids around, I mean, COVID, not COVID, that's just something that
Right.
No, it
nobody
doesn't
likes
mean-
it, but it happens all the time.
Right.
For this purpose, again, safety. The people, the teachers and people who don't, the teachers, parents who don't like it, that's
I
too
mean-
bad. This safety is first priority.
I mean, my
That's
kids,
all I'm-
I was teaching Pinellas virtual. My middle school kids had a different teacher the first 9 weeks. They had me last 9 weeks. Now I've got booted out because the numbers dropped, so they're gonna have a 3rd teacher. So so the parents don't like it, the kids don't like it. Nobody likes it, but we're doing it.
Right, a lot of people have been moved around and a lot of teachers are getting moved around for different reasons. When more kids come back, you can't have virtual, and then if it doesn't work, they have to move to teaching something completely different. I know that some of the Pinellas virtual are now in different
Yeah.
schools,
Yeah.
teaching virtually, but teaching something else with new kids.
Or
None of this is ideal.
Yeah.
None of this is ideal. I mean,
Can we take what Rita was saying in terms of just the notion of what are the options, what are the remedies?
right.
If a complaint is filed, what can we write down or think about, what are the options? So we have those 2 that we talked about, which is a schedule change for the student, and we also talked about a room change for the teacher, and that room change is a conversational piece because you want to talk
Right.
to the other person involved.
Well,
Can we talk about are there other things that we can consider as remedies to address the issue? Again, are there other things we can possibly consider?
yeah, I'm seeing what you're saying. And in that case, then we go back to what Bill was saying, is that every school is different because that's where the school comes in, like, oh, I know where we can put, I know who will, I know my teachers and I know who will be comfortable taking an extra kid, so this can go here. I know which room can hold this extra kid. That's where the school, knowing the school and each individual school comes into play.
but it doesn't matter what the process.
Pardon me, Latoya has her hand up.
Okay, Latoya, go ahead.
Charmaine.
Hi, so,
but I heard someone say a third option would be to hire someone else. Was that a response to punitive to punish teachers for not
I don't get what
wanting
she
to
said.
have extra heads in an abundance of caution? Or why was that comment made? Maybe I missed the response.
She said something about there was someone maybe hiring someone else as the third option. I don't think that was mentioned.
No, she said something about teachers
What Latoya
taking.
is saying is that, it was brought to talk to like, maybe the principal talks to the area soup or elementary director or director about other options. And she wants to make sure that it's not seen as, the teacher being disrespectful or that it would be punitive in nature.
That's not what I got.
Okay, so Frank, I think we would go down this path. One of the concepts we gotta talk about is who owns the classroom set. And we were just talking about, it made it sound to me like there were administrators who said you only got 6 feet in front of the room instead of the 8 feet. My assumption when we wrote this is that teachers own classroom setup. And the teacher's gonna pick where the 8 foot is. Right? So again, I could be wrong, but if we go back to, if we're gonna talk about it being 4 feet apart or whatever number apart, one option is for the administrator to come in and redesign the room. And as long as we're keeping the 8 feet in the front of the room and keep the desks 4 feet apart, right, it could be we have to remove excess furniture. It could be we have to start with kids up against the wall. I don't know, but I mean, I think that's one thing that we need to be clear on if we go down this path, like who has final say on the room arrangement.
Well, again, that differed from school to school, from what I heard. There were some schools where the teacher was totally in charge of setting up their room and how they wanted the students arranged, as long as they followed the basic rules. And then there were some schools where they had no say whatsoever. So where the administrators took the lead on that. So that did differ again from school to school. Again, because there was nothing specific in our agreement on how that should be done. That's where the problems come from, all the vagaries that everyone interprets it differently. And including some of our teachers still thought, our own teachers thought we had 6 feet in the MOU. And I said, you find 6 feet in that MOU because it's not there. It wasn't because, as I said, the CDC changed their rules as we were still working through the first MOU, taking away that necessity. But you have to also add into, we can't be saying that, well, since everyone's wearing a mask, we can move them closer together. Because even though we have the mask mandate, the masks are not being worn completely the way they're supposed to be. That differs from school to school also, where in some schools it's being strictly enforced. In some schools, in some of the classrooms, they're not wearing their masks because the teacher doesn't want to. In other schools, it is very lax all through the building. This is, again, interpretation of the rules. And in those schools, you're going to have more issues with more cases because now you put them closer together and there's no strict adherence to the mask policy.
Without specificity in this, there's no trigger point to rearrange the room, to bring in an outside somebody to look at it, to have the conversation about, do we need to change schedules? Without that, there's no trigger to make it happen. It's just a nebulous thing that's out there. You have to have a trigger point to make the conversation happen, if it has to happen.
What's the minimum trigger point you guys would be satisfied with?
Dr. Corbett, on your Excel chart, which column would be 3 feet apart? Because they're not labeled on the top. Is it the 27.5 or?
None of them are. Most of them are 4
Are
by
all
5.
these 4 feet for the kids?
No, you gotta just take the square footage and determine it. 3 feet apart would be 9.
Right.
I didn't put a column of 9 in there. If you guys would agree to 9, we can make anything work. Other than the fact that it would be hard to walk between.
So all these were based on 4?
No, there was one for 4. If you start at the one that says 20, that's 4 feet by 5 feet, 20, and then 25 is 5 by 5, so.
It's bigger.
Yeah, I mean, I just.
We didn't go this way, okay.
Yeah, I know, I
mean,
didn't,
So
I
conceivably, the first
didn't
column
get
is
that
what
because it wasn't
is
labeled.
even extra
Yes.
over what's required. Is that correct? Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
so I have an interactive
The
one
first one's for,
on my phone,
Yeah.
so I just put in 16, and if you put in 16, the smallest, the 600 square foot classroom could have 28 kids. And the 1,000 square foot classroom could have 53 kids.
But are you allowing for the teacher space?
I'm allowing 160 square feet for the teacher space, but I'm not taking into account circulation built in, I'm not taking any of that stuff into account. So it's, yeah. So again, what's the minimum you think? What'd you say yours were? 46?
Oh, mine are 16. I have the old sewing room.
It was Michael that said that.
You're talking about Mike. Mike had,
We had 29 kids.
Mine have, when there were 25, yeah. Because I haven't had the 4 additional footage, so I can do the new measurements yet. It was 19 and a half inches between each desk. So from head to head, it's 46 inches if you add in the width of the desk. Then there's 3 rows, there are 3 rows of them, 6 feet between each of the rows. Which you need for the mandatory walkway, because you have student chairs that stick into that 6 feet.
I'm sure about the mandatory walkway being.
I can show you the write-up that I got from the
88,
fire marshal. That said minimum 30 walkway.
well, you gotta have the path.
I have the email from my.
That's why libraries have certain rules.
Oh,
I
I'm
can tell you, that's
getting
something
so much
we haven't
trouble.
consulted with them on this. I didn't.
I didn't even think. Yeah.
No, that, yeah.
So I have one set of 2 desks that are over here. There's a 30.5 inch walkway between that and the next set of desks, and there's 19 and a half between the rest because it's all the space there is.
It just seems odd to me, because back in the day when we put 45 desks in a classroom, I don't remember big aisles.
Yeah, but that's big fire.
Yeah, they have some.
Remember, 45.
On your,
What is
Dr. Corbett, on your 16 row, where does 35 feet fall? On your interactive, when you change it to 16, where does 35 feet fall?
35 students,
Mm-hmm.
just over 700 square feet. 700 square feet gives you 34 students.
Okay, so that to me seems very crowded. Because, I mean, only because I'm picturing a room at our school and I know what size they are. And if you had 35 in one of those that I'm picturing, that would be very crowded. Because we have so many built-ins, and I know it's different at every school.
We're not talking about replacing the 26 or the things in whatever it's on what
Caps,
page.
No,
We're not talking about that. So the
No.
caps will still be in place. We would just be
I'm
using
trying
this
to
4
picture
feet
it.
head to head.
Right.
Where you go over the top of the
Very
encore.
Sometimes.
Because Gibbs is a new school. And you were thinking.
Brad has his hand up.
Brad, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, I might have missed it. I'm just curious. I know we keep talking the distance between the people side to side. How are we measuring front to back?
Head to head.
So people are sitting right behind somebody. Where we measure, where's that measurement coming in?
Should be head to head.
You were doing a square, weren't you? Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Say, so some tables are different sizes and desks are different sizes. So,
Head to head.
you know, we still get closer together because they're, you know, and is there a walkway there? Is there space there? Because I think it's more the germs going forward than side to side. I'm just want to make sure that we measure, you know, the depth of it too, not just side to side. Because I know we keep talking shoulder to shoulder, head to head, but that one concerned me too, front to back.
Yeah, I certainly have.
Very good point. Colleen, I did cut you off. Sorry. Go ahead.
Barry, what I was gonna say was the difference in classroom sizes at Gibbs versus maybe I in the building.
I mean, I think the main building classrooms are really small classrooms. There's not very many classes that small. They're only 1927. But the media building, the those classrooms.
They're bigger, but
are the
your
same. few that are smaller than others, but I think it's fairly consistent. You know, and just thinking about the setup of some of the classrooms, there wasn't a whole lot of choice in the setup of the classrooms because just like in here, the smart board was in a particular area, the technology hookup and the internet is in a particular area. So in many cases, you couldn't have a conversation with the teacher about where they wanted to be because they were forced to be in close proximity of those particular areas. And so there may have been some times when the class was set up without the teacher's input only because that was the layout of the classroom. And so, but yeah, I think that in many classes, I think Gibbs being a relatively newly built structure, that they're decent sizes. 25 seats in there, 24 seats, it'll work. I think it'll work even more in certain classes. I think it'll work.
This fire marshal thing's throwing me for a loop.
Just found it. It was
It is true though.
September 29th,
They get really,
the message, we issued annual inspection, the fire inspector found the following items in violation of the fire code. The aisle shall not be less than 30 inches wide.
I got in trouble during testing once in the library for that.
My classrooms too.
Wow.
I have a student in a wheelchair too, but
Yeah, and that's
and
really
she's
weird.
virtual though.
But that's really where the 30 inches comes from, wheelchair, for the wheelchair.
Yeah.
Right.
I gotta research this fire marshal thing, that means a game changer as far as what we could do.
Right.
You hear what you're saying, you need a trigger point.
Yeah.
You need a definitive trigger point to trigger whatever the next step is. So let us work on finding out the answer from the fire marshal, finding a trigger point that we can live with, and hopefully it's something that you could also live with. And then we'll talk about what the process is to hit the trigger point. We really think it's gotta be something where it goes beyond the school. I don't know, if someone comes to you complaining, then you talk to us, and we need to go beyond the school. We need to get an executive director, an area superintendent involved with the principal to assess the situation and come up with a solution. If we go down this path, I'm just being upfront, I really think the solution needs to be, we can't do minimum sizes that we're saying we're apart from each other and not look at the classroom cap.
Yeah.
Right? We can't do both because no matter what we say, this has got to be a zero sum when we're all done. We're not going to have the ability to add. So if the small classrooms mean we have, it's going to require us to add 50 or 100 teachers. We don't have that ability right now financially. So we just got to look at it all. Now, there's a lot of promises on the horizon. There's the second CARES thing that they working on. Our state's going to take 100% of that. We get FTE and we get nothing out of it. So we don't know what that looks like. We haven't gotten any information about what it will look like. We just got to wait and see. So for right now, we're just trying to figure out what do we do right now. And the bottom line is we still have probably a little over 2,000 less students than what we staffed for. I looked at the class sizes today, and again, these are averages, and averages high, lots of ugly, right? But in high school, where the class size is 25, we're down at like 20 something is our average class. The one that's supposed to be 22, we're at 18, 23, and the one that's supposed to be primary is supposed to be 18, we're at like 15.8 or something. So we've got room within everything we have to make this work. The problem's going to be the devil's in the detail. There's always going to be exceptions, and the exceptions kill us because if we put something in, we're going to trigger point, all of a sudden it triggers 1,000 pieces, and we're going to get bogged down working through the basic code. Let us answer those three questions. Let us get with the fire marshal. God, I'm hoping it's just Palm Harbor Fire Marshal.
No, well, whoever comes to Penobscot too, we got in trouble last spring during testing, for being too close together and like.
It may be different.
Yeah.
It may have a different requirement, but they have requirements.
Yeah.
You guys could really think through, so what do we do when we hit the trigger? your end, like, what are the acceptable solutions? I think we probably get back to Thursday if you guys are available.
Well, then there's also there are a few other things I would like you to think about in that timeframe.
I guess.
Where we had asked for specific ways for simultaneous teachers to get extra planning time. And we suggested that they be excused from meetings and receive, right, and that was not an acceptable idea. So we're gonna need some acceptable ideas. We need specific ways that those teachers are going to get extra planning time. Because some principals are giving it and some principals are not. And they're drowning. They're drowning. When you and I spoke about the grade changing and sinking and we asked for it, please don't make it Friday night. And you agreed, you thought that it should be pushed back to give some more time because we know what happens when you sink too soon. Well, they synced Friday night and now that's all we've been hearing is how people can't retrieve their students, they can't get the grades in, they can't. This is the kind of stuff.
But I thought we had lengthy discussions with Kevin.
And he said that
And he
several,
sent out an
and
email.
Connie's team has been.
Friday night was the canvas pass-through shutdown. You can still read, you can still read.
Oh,
But the convenience of the canvas.
No, they could not access the work itself was in Canvas. It disappeared.
They did not follow the
They-
process
they didn't
that
follow
Kevin
the-
said. Yes.
Can you explain that? They didn't follow what?
So several weeks.
Kevin
before all this-
misunderstood.
Several weeks before all this went down, we went through, we met with Connie's team, we talked teaching and learning, and we went through the whole process, and Kevin put a series of information like guides out to teachers, and we sent it out to schools saying, please make sure you're going to be doing this, because unfortunately, those dates and focus are timed to our semester. So it's not so simple to say, we can just push it back. Well, if we're going to push it back, the quarters and focus are built from the start of the school year,
There would
once
have
the
been no
calendar is done.
classes in
Right.
quarter three in Canvas.
Right, so we had, unfortunately, that's not a simple, it's a lot of moving parts, and it's not so simple just to change it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we sent out a lot of stuff, but I talked to Connie even on yesterday rather, and we were talking about it because they sent out some more information saying the teachers, if you have any issues, they can help the teacher retrieve whatever they're missing, because if you're still trying to grade, that function, you can't find it, it's archived. But there's ways that we can help teachers, and so if we can just spread the word that we got a lot of resources that are out there, and I know it's probably timing, people just missed it or whatever the case may be, but there
I
is.
just pulled it up, but it literally explains how to make sure that you synchronize before the end of Friday, January 15th, so that you can sync your grades if you use a grade past that.
Aside from the fact that it was a violation of the contract,
We did that.
that was.
Well, it doesn't stop you from still
Yeah,
doing your
you can still
grades.
go back
It
to
doesn't
grades.
stop
But
you.
the final was Friday morning. And they have 2 days, a turnaround of 2 days. So we got that, and you couldn't get access to the work itself. The work is in Canvas. The grade, you can put grades into Focus anytime. The work, and Kevin kept thinking at the time, because this conversation was way before Kevin put out his information to teachers. This conversation had started very early by a teacher who actually did know how Canvas worked, because that wouldn't be me.
Yeah, we started that too, around the same time.
Yes,
because
they
we
were,
planning
and
for-
we were back and forth, and then he moved it to Connie Colosi to talk to the teacher, because Connie knew more about the system than he did. He was not understanding the difference between Focus and Canvas, what each capability was. And then I am, because unfortunately, I am CC'd on all of these conversations happening by email. If exactly what was predicted, what would happen if this took place, did happen. And yes, they are trying to help those teachers retrieve those students and to retrieve the work that is now gone. But we had anticipated it and said just by moving the date, the close date, from Friday night to even Sunday night would have made an enormous difference. And they would have been able to retrieve those students in time and get that work in time. because they knew they had access to focus, you have access to.
Yeah.
That's where the grades go. So that was the problem, and I think the problem is just misunderstood. That's all.
And we know how hard the TICs are working in the district and the chronic closing team, they work their twitchies off. But there's only, 8 of them, and there's, 10,000 teachers who are all, I had to turn my phone off because today was supposed to be my trade day. I'm the tech coordinator. It started at 7 a.m. Bing, 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 bing. So I get that, but it's just that it was more stress that they didn't need, is what we're trying to say. These teachers are so stressed and they're trying to keep good positive attitudes and really trying to work hard for our students, but they're barely keeping their heads above water right now.
Okay.
And I know when you come in to see them,
I'll tell you
Yeah.
the work, and you know what? You plan a week for that perfect lesson and it just bombs, right? And so I will also, I understand Connie and them have been working, so it's,
So it was just one more thing. We're just trying to alleviate some of this stress with the simultaneous.
If I may, just one
I fully
additional
understand.
component that added to that, a lot of times teachers will try to grade the exams as they come in that week. But something that I personally believe in from hearing from the teachers at my school that needs to be addressed probably in this new MOU is what happens with, because we had a mass influx of kids who were QP, quarantine present, or all of a sudden their parent was more concerned, just happened to be exam week, more concerned about COVID, so they were going to keep them home. And then you had teachers who taught an all-in-class class being forced to create all of a sudden, within a day or two, a digital version of the exam because we weren't allowed to tell the student when they come back to school they can take the exam, as we would in a normal year.
Well, that's true.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
That's not the way that should have happened. We sent out explicit, right, but it wasn't the way, that wasn't the process. We sent out explicit instructions to principals and assistant principals for curriculum to make sure that everyone understood that face-to-face students took face-to-face exams, no exceptions, and that they were to schedule makeups. Online students took the online exam, face-to-face, took the face-to-face. That was an explicit
That's not what's
instruction.
happening.
That's not what happened in my school either.
Times to teachers and
I didn't realize that was a
principals, or
thing.
pardon me, principals and APCs.
Oops.
There you go.
Nope.
So that took away the time that they would have had grading.
On top of the
Last
fact
weeks
that,
of assignments and
because we had the outage with Canvas, we've also sent out information to schools saying that we've extended those, like makeups can take place starting next week. So, and just as another thing, we don't necessarily advertise this in terms of like so schools can schedule this, but within any performance matters assessment, they even once that window closed, there are 5 additional days that schools can do makeup testing. We don't advertise it because we want schools intentionally planning for that week.
Right.
But I don't know where a lot of those disconnects are coming in at. And I would love to know specific schools
Right.
that are not getting it right because we're
Oh,
working,
you
just
just
like,
got
everybody's
several
working their
right
butt
here.
off to address these issues and not create problems
Right.
and to alleviate the level of stress. So with those, if we have specific schools, we need to then address those specific schools because they could, we don't want those one experiences to be overshadowing what's happening right across the district because we have a lot of schools that are doing it right. And
those
so,
emails went out.
well,
Oh, yeah.
tons of them.
I think our administrators get 10 times more emails than even we do. And I think sometimes they do get updates and it's till that, if you did, a couple hours later, a day later. I mean, I wish there was a way for you guys to like flag those.
But
like,
even
this
in
is
our
today.
meetings, we have
Yeah,
meetings with principals and
And this
APs, and
wasn't
we
just
explicitly
one email
have
one month.
conversations
This
about
is-
those
this
things,
is
so.
Like literally since
Yeah.
October, preparing them for this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
does the information just not get trickled down?
It's
to
not
the
because
school-based
it's the
administrators?
first
Well,
time hearing this.
We have.
Didn't even get to
so-
this, it didn't even get to the school-based administrator in some of these cases.
So,
They're saying it
It's not,
yeah, because we have emails that, like, for example, my content specialist, when I send out stuff about, like, all the grading stuff, how to do grades, like, we send the protocol out. I send it to the principals, we had conversations several times about it. My content specialist in turn sent it to the teachers. Because also one thing we did differently in middle school is most of the exams get like grading, like configurations, we made them as optional this year because of COVID and gave teachers
Right.
more
We even
control
talked
of it.
about the
So a lot
flexibility
of that
teachers
stuff
had
got
for the
trickled down.
grading and
to those teacher levels as well, or to
Right.
the department chairs and stuff. I don't understand where the disconnect is. but
Maybe
we're
there'd be
willing
a
to-
way to have like the email you send to the principals with all the top secret stuff, and then the one you send to us. Because we get your emails, we read them, but I don't think they're.
My number said share it with everybody at your school that you need to have this, it's not top secret, it's
No.
I'm
process.
just kidding, but I'm just.
But the email said that it was sent to your language arts department, to your science. They don't say just to the principal. Those emails
Yeah.
are sent to the department chair.
By the content
Right.
specialist.
The department chair doesn't trump what the principal or assistant principal tells the teacher.
But then we're not having department.
We're not-
meetings.
we're not even talking about
You're
that.
so off topic.
Yes, we are.
Oh, no, I mean, I'm talking.
Okay, wait, guys, this is,
Rein it in.
So I.
everybody needs to talk one at a time.
One at a time, and I think let me just summarize. There was definitely miscommunication, or maybe the communication wasn't received by the appropriate people. I am looking at our clock, and I do know people have 5 o'clock meetings, and so I really would like, I could say, well, no, I really couldn't say that all night, but anyway. But, I know that is one area, let us go back, and it is one school, we can check that, and we can go forward with that.
Okay,
So
but
what else?
getting back to the extra planning, I want a specific way
Okay, I
for
got that.
all levels, because if we say you could miss 2 meetings a week, that might work for elementary, because they have so many meetings a week.
I've got that written
But
down.
that would mean that high school teachers aren't having any meetings a week. So it needs to be specific, and it needs to be made clear in here so that people are getting that additional planning, because they're really struggling. They're still struggling. They want rid of the simultaneous. I understand that you can't have both. You want safe, lower numbers in your classroom, then sometimes you have to have simultaneous, because that's one of the ways we're keeping these numbers low. I get that. It doesn't mean that simultaneous is good, that it's a good way to teach, or that it's easy. And people are struggling, and to be honest, they're exhausted from it. They're
Okay, and we hear you on that. Let us go
Fatigue.
back and we will.
we might also have to talk about something else we can do for them,
I
for
think
those
there
poor
has,
teachers.
I think there has to be a cap for the simultaneous teachers about what they can have in person and what they can have online at the same time. I know we were using the MyPCS, but that seems to be where we're taking more abuse with the number of students. So I really want to look at that number not being as high for the people that are doing face-to-face and simultaneous.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we want to look at some ways to make their lives a little easier. And then there was, and back to, of course, the major issue that we hear about every single day, all day long, is the notification issues. Now I'm getting emails from parents as well, who are infuriated because apparently the parent was a friend with a teacher, saw the COVID report, has a child at Seminole High School, and said, oh my God, there were 40 cases at Seminole High School. I have only been notified of 15. Maybe it was because they didn't have to, maybe their kid wasn't anywhere near some of those cases, but the parent was livid. They said the only school that is notifying them of every single case is Bowder Elementary. She has 3 kids, 1 at middle, 1 at high, 1 at elementary. The only one she was happy with was Bowder Elementary, because she had been notified about all the cases, judging by the numbers. Seminole Middle, she was miserable, very unhappy, and Seminole High. So now not only am I hearing from the teachers, and now the parents think that I can help them, but we need notification immediately. The process is still taking too long. When the process is back to a 24-hour turnaround, the way it was in the beginning, then notification will no longer be a problem, because the notifications were happening at the end of the process. They're not happening soon enough, and your teachers are feeling that you don't care. I know that you're trying to think of all these ways to protect them and to do a good job educating students. But the impression is that you don't care. When you don't give them the heads up, there's a possible case, take extra precautions. That's all that needs to be said, for them to feel a modicum of control and and to feel that they are part of the system instead of victims. We need to change that feeling. And I think that's the only way that's going to do it, is if you keep them in the loop. You don't have to tell them who the kid is or who the employee is, or no information beyond that. They're not looking for that. They just want a heads up. And apparently so do the parents, from what now I'm finding out.
And in these COVID numbers, that includes the MyPCS students, right?
No,
It does not. Oh, never mind. I'll mark that off then.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's no quarantine necessary. Right.
Yeah.
Those kids who caught in contact and had it over the break.
Yes.
It does include those.
You know, Dan, I thought we solved this the last time when we told you that you could just tell anybody who calls you and asks you about it, that if you're the teacher and if you do not get a questionnaire of the crucial questions from your principal, then you've not had a positive case in your room. And if you do get a questionnaire from your principal, there was a positive case in your room, and even if it's 3 days later before the health department tells us, as soon as the principal asks you those crucial questions, you know there's a positive case.
Yeah, I had that, just.
But we don't send an email out.
But the crucial questions aren't coming to them. Okay, here's a specific Belcher Elementary teacher, she's the parent, reported, and then also spoke to her because she has a good relationship with all of her parents of all of her students, and said, my kid has COVID. So she patiently was waiting for someone to tell her from the school or to ask questions. 4 days, she kept texting me every day. Day 2, nothing. Day 3, haven't heard a word. This is where the problem is. Because the process is taking place, by the time they even get in there to ask the questions, it's already been 4 or 5 days. And if the teacher,
Can you give me that name, because, can you give me the name so I can research it and find out what the holdup was on that one?
I think she already had called into the COVID team.
I know, but I want the name so I can go dig deep into I want to go backtrack what the situation.
Okay, I'll email
I
it
want
to
to
you.
know what that, yeah. And let me look into.
Yeah, I'm not going to say, yeah, I will email that to you.
Many of the, just from a leadership standpoint, or from the principals, many of the cases that we're dealing with now are not necessarily quarantine. Like every day I've been.
We're not talking about quarantine. That's not what I'm talking about.
Every day I'm sending out emails about the list of students who've been found to be positive cases, but there's no school-wide quarantine because it happened over the break. So a individual teacher of that student might not receive that questionnaire or that phone call because the kid hasn't been in that class.
Right, but you're notifying the teachers so your teachers are happy. They're not in the group.
I'm notifying the entire school community.
Yeah, well,
That's
that's not
what I'm
happening.
saying. That's what needs to be done.
I don't get that.
Not a
I would
specific-
love that.
But it's not a specific email.
No. Oh, wait.
No, we're
It's
not
a
even saying
specific-
that's
It's not a
necessary.
specific call to just that teacher. I'm sending a call out
Yeah.
to everyone stating that there's no need, we had a case, but there's no need to quarantine for that particular case.
Yeah,
Right,
that's
but if it's
amazing. I don't get that.
All right. Many schools aren't even getting that. There are also principals who will walk down to the rooms and say, there's a possible case. I'll let you know if it's verified. I'll let you know if anybody needs to be quarantined. That gives the teacher peace of mind. I know, maybe this week, I'm staying behind my buffer until I find out anything new.
Why aren't you staying behind?
Because
Why aren't you
some
staying behind
teachers
the buffer?
are
Yeah.
moving around.
Okay.
But if I know there may be an issue,
I would never.
I might choose to be.
I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that with you. I wouldn't come into a teacher with.
Well, they love it. They absolutely love it.
Yeah,
Some
some
do
don't.
not, then I'm gonna
Okay,
say-
Now I'm
so-
on pins and needles, and I don't even know.
Some it creates hysteria.
Yes,
There's
it
a
creates that.
Yes,
COVID
it does.
case at your school.
Yes, it does.
And I'm not saying about the bubble, I'm thinking about the fact that I have to check on my 82-year-old father. And so if I know someone near me has it, now I'm not gonna go by for the weekend, I'm just gonna call.
Okay.
You know, I'm just gonna call him
The
instead of
Department of
going
Health
on.
will tell us we should assume that everybody has it.
Yeah, so I am one of those people that has a 5 o'clock
But
meeting.
then-
So
Yes,
I
you
just
are
want to
doing it,
say,
you are.
I am one of those people that have a 5 o'clock meeting. So I just want to say what's really important to me also on here is under the safety precautions L, we have got to tighten up what happens to kids that aren't wearing their masks.
Absolutely.
Yes.
That is something that is keeping us safe. And if it's just going to be a suggestion, then we don't need a policy. But if it's a policy, then it needs to have a
It needs to be
consequence.
enforced
Okay, we'll look at that.
across the board.
Student referred. We did.
Yeah, and you went back and made it weaker than it was.
Right.
Colleen would like to include teachers on that.
We need to make sure this gets taken out.
Oh, yes, across the board.
If they're gonna take out
Administrators
compensation,
as well.
we should Take out the consent part.
Administrators as well.
No, you have teacher
Yeah,
consent.
And
We
one
can't
of,
go
I
over the
think one of the
numbers
things
without
we need to
teacher
keep in
consent.
mind is that, like, when we bring an
Is that
example
what that says?
Yeah,
of something that's
I read
happening
it.
at a school
So would it be better?
in a
if they
district
can't
this
go over
size, it's
at all?
more than
Even
likely
without teacher
not
consent?
just happening
they're
at
gonna go over.
a school.
You
In
can't
a
say
district
that.
this size,
because what are you
it's
gonna do
very
with that?
likely that
That
it's
one
happening
kid?
in more than one place.
You
And
got
the reason we
22 and
asked
that's the
for-
cap. What are you gonna do with them?
Right, no, I understand.
Somebody's gotta take it. But I think it
Kind
should
of
have
read this,
compensation.
but I don't think for Colleen, who is following all of the regulations and following everything, that for me to send out a note saying, hey, you need to, she's gonna go, I am, stop bothering me, right? It's like, we need to address the situation, because that's the only reason. We can send out emails, we can send out reminders, we can send out communications that we think everybody reads and everybody understands what the intention was of it, but we all know that's not gonna happen. We better do that. Okay,
Hey, guys,
so
thanks
we
for
have
joining
a
in.
list
We are
of things.
going
Are those
to-
the main items?
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody, for joining in. We are
No,
gonna
well,
end the
those are
live
the
stream
major
because
ones
we're
that
gonna
I
set
was
another
concerned
meeting
with.
for later in the week or early
Um,
next week. Thanks for tuning in. Bye, everybody.
Go ahead, Janet.
With all the mask protocols that we have in place, we still have many classrooms where the kids are eating. And they have their masks off for extended periods of
Have
time.
that much too.
So regardless of all the mask protocols we have, the kids will sit there. If they're separated, they're yelling at each other, so then you're spreading.